It all started on a slow Sunday afternoon, the kind of day where the sunlight slants just right through the living room blinds, casting long, golden streaks across the carpet, and the house is filled with that quiet hum of calm. I had just made a cup of chamomile tea, the steam curling gently up into the air, and I was about to settle into the couch with a book my husband had recommended when the knock came. I should explain. My husband, Tom, has this friend, Robert. They've known each other since college, inseparable, really, but I've never felt close to him. Polite, friendly, and a little too quick with a joke that sometimes makes me roll my eyes. So, naturally, when I opened the door and saw him standing there, I didn't think much of it at first. "Hey, sorry to drop by unannounced," Robert said, leaning slightly against the doorframe. He smiled, but there was something different in his eyes that I couldn't immediately place. Something softer, more serious. "Oh, hi, Robert. Everything okay?" I asked, stepping aside to let him in. He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully, and then he said something that made me pause. "I need to talk to you, just you, not Tom." My heart skipped a beat, not because I was worried exactly, but because it was unusual. Very unusual. Tom had always encouraged Robert to drop by whenever, but there was something in the tone, quiet, respectful, urgent, that made me feel a sudden shiver of anticipation. We moved into the living room, and I gestured toward the couch. "Sit down. What's going on?" Robert sat, his hands clasped loosely in his lap, and I noticed for the first time how much he seemed to weigh every word before he spoke. I hope this isn't weird," he started, his voice low, "but there's something about you I've wanted to tell you for a long time. Something I never said because I respect Tom, and I respect you, but I think you should know." I blinked, caught off guard, unsure whether to feel alarmed or curious. "I've always admired you," he continued, his eyes not leaving mine. "Not just how kind or funny you are, but the way you make everyone around you feel seen. You have this warmth, and I think I've been carrying a feeling for you that isn't just friendship. I know it's complicated, and I know it's unusual, but I had to be honest." For a moment, the room was filled with silence, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I felt my chest tighten, not with fear, but with a strange mixture of intrigue and emotion I didn't expect to confront on a sunny Sunday afternoon. I don't know what to say," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. My hands toyed with the edge of my cup, gripping it so tightly I could feel the warmth seep into my fingers. "Robert, this is unexpected. I've never thought of you that way. And Tom, he's my husband. I love him." Robert nodded slowly. "I know, and I would never do anything to hurt that. But I also think it's possible to feel deeply about someone and still respect all the relationships you care about. I'm not asking for anything to change, but I wanted to be honest. That's all." I looked at him, studying the earnest lines on his face, the vulnerability in his posture. And somehow, despite the shock, despite the awkwardness, I felt a strange comfort in the honesty. The way he spoke wasn't selfish or crude. It was sincere, careful, and it made me think about my own feelings in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. The sun moved slowly across the room, bathing us in golden light. And as we sat there, sharing a silence that felt more intimate than words, I realized that this moment, unexpected, fragile, and complicated, was going to change something inside me. After that afternoon, the house felt different, like the air itself was charged with possibility. I kept replaying Robert's words in my mind, each time noticing the care in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes. I couldn't help but wonder how he could feel that way and still respect Tom so completely. It was confusing, exhilarating, and a little frightening all at once. Tom had gone out to run errands, leaving me alone with a quiet house. I found myself glancing at the door more often than usual, half expecting Robert to return, half hoping he wouldn't. It wasn't just curiosity. I think part of me wanted to see if the warmth I felt that afternoon was real, or if it had been a trick of my imagination. The next evening, I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when there was a soft knock at the door. My heart thumped in a way that made me pause mid-chop. I knew it was him before I even opened it. "Hey," Robert said, his voice low, friendly, and just a touch hesitant. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" I stepped aside and gestured toward the living room, feeling a strange thrill as he crossed the threshold. He carried himself with that same careful balance of respect and quiet intensity. We sat down again on the couch, the familiar golden light from the lamp casting shadows across his thoughtful face. He didn't rush, didn't force the moment. Instead, he just looked at me, as if waiting to see if I was ready to speak. "I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday," he admitted after a long pause. "It was unexpected, I know, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I felt like I had to see you, to talk honestly again. That's all." "I appreciate that," I said softly, feeling a lump in my throat. "I've been thinking about it too, about what you said, and about what it means, or could mean. I've never felt this kind of connection with anyone outside of my marriage. It's confusing, Robert." He nodded, eyes gentle. "I know, and I don't want to push anything. I feel like there's something here, a deep understanding, a comfort that I haven't felt with anyone else. And I can't just ignore it." I felt a shiver run through me. It wasn't just attraction. It was recognition, a strange resonance that made my chest feel both heavy and light at the same time. I realized I was leaning slightly toward him, unconsciously searching for the warmth of his presence. We talked for hours that night, quietly, carefully, about life, memories, and the small things that reveal who we are when no one is looking. About love and respect, and the delicate balance between desire and loyalty. I discovered things about Robert I had never noticed before. His quiet humor, his thoughtful way of observing the world, the kindness in the way he listened. And I realized that somehow he had seen me in ways I hadn't been fully aware of myself. When Tom returned later that evening, I felt an odd mixture of relief and reluctance. The moment felt sacred, held in that brief window before the rest of the world intruded. I watched Robert leave, the soft click of the door behind him echoing in the empty hallway, and I realized that my life had subtly shifted. Something had opened inside me, a door I didn't even know was there. I knew I couldn't ignore this connection, no matter how complicated it was. And as I stood there, alone in the quiet living room, I made a small, silent promise to myself to explore these feelings with honesty, respect, and care. To honor my marriage, yes, but also to honor the surprising, tender human connection that had quietly, insistently entered my life. Days turned into a rhythm of quiet anticipation. I found myself noticing Robert more often, in the way he laughed at something small Tom said, in the careful way he adjusted a picture frame when he visited, in the soft tone he used when speaking to me. Every glance, every word, seemed to carry a weight I hadn't realized was there before. One afternoon, Tom had gone out for a business meeting that was running longer than expected. I was in the garden, pruning the rose bushes, when the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. Robert. "Hey," he said, smiling gently as he stepped inside. "I thought I'd bring some of those fresh pastries from the bakery down the street. Thought you might like them with your tea." It was a small gesture, simple and thoughtful, and somehow it felt intimate. We carried the tray to the living room and sat down, the afternoon sunlight spilling across the floor. I noticed how close he sat, just a whisper of space between us, yet perfectly respectful. "I've been thinking about what you said last week," I said, breaking the silence. "About connection, and about honesty. I realize now I've been craving something I didn't even know I was missing. But it feels complicated. I don't want to betray Tom, I don't want to betray myself." Robert nodded, his eyes soft and unwavering. "I understand, and I would never ask you to do anything that would hurt him or you. I want you to feel safe expressing what's real without shame or fear. You don't have to define it or act on it, but I want you to know it's okay to feel it." There was a warmth in his words that made my chest ache, a gentle reassurance that felt like sunlight on my skin. I realized how much I trusted him, not just as Tom's friend, but as someone who could see me, truly see me, and hold that vision without judgment. For a long moment, we simply sat there, the quiet between us speaking volumes. I reached for my teacup, and somehow our hands brushed. I didn't pull away. I felt a shiver run through me, not of fear, but of recognition. It was a connection deeper than physical desire, more profound than casual attraction. It was the kind of connection that makes you feel seen, understood, alive. "I'm glad you're honest with me," I whispered. "It's freeing, in a way I didn't expect." "Me too," he said. "It's scary, but it's real. And real is Mayor." As the afternoon sun shifted, painting the room in soft amber tones, I realized that I was discovering parts of myself I had long neglected, parts that craved understanding, intimacy, and the quiet thrill of shared vulnerability. And with Robert, it wasn't just the thrill. It was a profound emotional resonance, a connection that made me feel truly alive. Eventually, he stood to leave, pausing at the door. "I should go before Tom gets back," he said softly, and I nodded. But as he reached the doorframe, he turned back and smiled, that gentle, knowing smile that had a way of staying with me long after he was gone. "We'll take it slow," he said. "No rush, no pressure, just honesty." And in that moment, I realized that our connection didn't need to be rushed or defined to be meaningful. Sometimes the deepest experiences come not from grand gestures, but from the quiet, unspoken understanding between two people who see each other fully. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a mixture of anticipation, reflection, and serenity. The world outside continued on as usual, but inside, something subtle yet profound had shifted. I had begun a journey of self-discovery, one that would challenge me, excite me, and ultimately teach me about the delicate, intricate nature of human connection. Weeks had passed since that afternoon with Robert in the garden, and life had settled into a quiet rhythm that was both comforting and revealing. I noticed the small ways our connection lingered, an extra pause in conversation, a shared glance across the room when Tom and I entertained guests, a warmth in my chest whenever Robert's name appeared in my thoughts. It wasn't reckless or impulsive. It was a slow, steady unfolding, like sunlight through a window that shifts hour by hour. One evening, Tom had gone out to meet an old friend for dinner, leaving me alone in the living room. I poured myself a cup of tea and settled onto the couch when, as if on cue, there was a soft knock at the door. Robert stepped inside, carrying that familiar calm presence that had become so unexpectedly important to me. "I thought I'd check in," he said quietly. "Just see how you're doing." We sat together in the warm lamplight, letting the silence stretch comfortably between us before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot," I admitted, "about what you and I have discovered, about honesty, connection, and boundaries. It's been enlightening, and sometimes a little scary." Robert nodded, his expression gentle. "I understand. I feel the same way. It's not about rushing or changing anything. It's about acknowledging that there's something real here without judgment or pressure." I realized in that moment how much I valued him, not just as a friend or a confidant, but as someone who helped me see myself more clearly. His presence had taught me patience, self-awareness, and the quiet courage it takes to embrace feelings that don't fit neatly into life's usual patterns. "I've learned something about myself through this," I said softly. that I can hold multiple forms of love and respect at once, that I can honor my marriage, cherish my family, and still recognize the depth of connection I feel with you. He reached out and gently placed his hand over mine. "And I respect that," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "That's what matters most, that we navigate this with care for you, for Tom, and for everyone we care about." We sat there, hands touching lightly, the room wrapped in quiet understanding. I realized that the intimacy we shared wasn't just physical or romantic. It was emotional, intellectual, spiritual even. It was the kind of connection that can exist in its own delicate space, nurtured by respect, trust, and honesty. When Tom returned later that night, everything felt normal again, and yet subtly transformed. I watched him greet me with his usual warmth, unaware of the small but profound ways my understanding of connection and love had expanded. I didn't feel guilt or secrecy. I felt clarity, a newfound sense of inner peace. As I lay in bed that night, reflecting on the weeks that had passed, I understood something important. Life isn't always about following one clear path. Sometimes it's about noticing the moments that challenge you, that awaken something deep inside, and letting those experiences teach you about empathy, honesty, and the breadth of your own heart. Robert had knocked on my door unexpectedly, and he had said something I hadn't expected. But through that moment, through every quiet conversation and thoughtful glance since, I had discovered a truth I would carry with me forever: that human connection, honest, respectful, tender, can be one of the most transformative experiences of a lifetime. And for me, it had been.